Thanks for watching my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Michael Anderson. I'm 34 years old, and for the past 6 years, I was married to Emily, a woman I sincerely believed was my soulmate. We share a beautiful daughter, Ava, who just turned 3. For a while, it felt like we had everything. We lived in a modest two-bedroom home in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. I worked long hours at a tech company, often pulling 10 or 11-hour days to give us a comfortable life. Emily stayed home working remotely as a freelance graphic designer, juggling her career while also caring for Ava. Our days were usually peaceful. Simple dinners, quiet weekends, the occasional outing to the park or the zoo. People always told me Emily had a bit of a wild streak back in college. They mentioned that she used to date around, switching boyfriends like hats, never settling for long. But by the time I met her, she seemed so different. Gentle, affectionate, funny, always supportive. I assumed the gossip was just that. Talk about a rebellious phase every teenager or early 20s adult might go through. Besides, I never saw any proof. Emily was the sort of woman who, if you needed help, would lend a hand before you even asked. I trusted her wholly. Yet, over the past few months, things began to shift. Initially, it was subtle. A momentary distance in her eyes when I came home, or an unexplained tension. She mentioned an old friend from college, Brian, in passing conversation, but with a somewhat forced casualness. I rarely gave it a second thought. She never indicated anything more than an old friendship. And I was too busy with deadlines, code reviews, and travel for occasional conferences to pick up on all the signals, if there were any. A daughter's odd question. One evening, maybe 2 months ago, I got home around 7 p.m. as usual, exhausted from work. Emily was cooking in the kitchen, wearing an apron and stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce. I walked over to kiss her on the cheek, but she seemed a bit tense. She flashed a quick smile that felt half-hearted, then returned her focus to the stove. I shrugged it off, figuring she'd had a stressful day. I slipped into the living room where Ava was doodling with crayons at the coffee table. She spotted me and squealed with delight, "Daddy." She flung her arms around my legs. My heart always melted at her excitement. I scooped her up, kissed her forehead, and asked her about her day. She told me she'd drawn pictures of birds and mountains. Then in that sweet childlike voice, she asked something that stopped me cold. "Ava," tilting her head, "Daddy, do we have two daddies here?" Me, frowning in confusion. "What do you mean, sweetheart? There's only one daddy. That's me, right?" Ava, looking serious, "But another daddy comes here. He brings candy sometimes. Mommy says hush, it's a secret." In that moment, my stomach clenched. My first instinct was that maybe she was mixing me up with her grandfather, or that Emily's father had visited. But he brings candy, and it's a secret, jarred me. My father's been in Florida for months, and Emily's dad lives in Texas. Neither had come by in ages. If it was a courier or a friend delivering groceries, Ava wouldn't call him another daddy. Yet I tried to remain calm. Kids can misunderstand or imagine things. Suspicion and the hidden camera. I decided not to confront Emily immediately. Instead, I mulled it over for days. Could my daughter be fantasizing? Children do come up with weird stories, but the phrase "another daddy" kept echoing. I was torn. Part of me felt guilty for suspecting my wife. Another part whispered that something was wrong. Finally, I settled on a plan. I'd place a small camera in the kitchen, the heart of our home, to see who came by during the day. I found a modest motion-activated camera online, nothing too fancy, but enough to capture daily events. I reasoned it might catch footage of the so-called mystery visitor. If it turned out to be a misunderstanding, I'd feel relieved. Late one night, after Emily had gone to bed, I set the camera on top of a tall shelf near some ceramic decorations. It wasn't exactly a covert, high-tech spy device, but if you didn't look closely, it might pass unnoticed. The next day, I left for work, anxious to see if I'd find anything unusual. A few evenings later, I came home, quietly grabbed the camera's memory card, and tried to review the footage on my laptop in the garage so Emily wouldn't notice. To my surprise, the recordings were all blank after the initial morning hours. The feed cut off early. That's when I discovered the camera had been powered off. I walked into the house, planning to investigate if maybe the battery died. As soon as I stepped into the living room, Emily confronted me, holding the little camera in her hand. Emily, with a furious glare, "Michael, what the hell is this? Why are you spying on me?" Me, startled, "Where did you?" Emily, "I was cleaning and saw something on the shelf. This thing's not exactly hidden. Think I wouldn't notice? Are you recording me in my own kitchen? What's wrong with you? My mind raced. She was outraged, which was understandable if I'd truly invaded her privacy. But I also felt that spark of suspicion. Was she that upset because she was guilty of something? I stammered a bit, tried to keep calm. Me, I, Look, Em, I only did it because Ava said something strange. Something about another daddy coming around. I got worried. Maybe she's mixing up Grandpa or the mailman. Emily, cutting me off, voice trembling. You think I'm cheating, don't you? My God, Michael, you can't even trust me. Our daughter is 3. She says random stuff. She daydreams, she pretends, and you jump to this insane conclusion. She pressed her lips tight, tears forming in her eyes. She insisted that nobody else was coming over, that Ava must have confused a neighbor or a courier with a daddy. She chastised me for betraying her trust by planting a camera. Me, I'm sorry, but you have to admit it's weird for her to say that. She literally told me it was a secret. That doesn't sound like a normal misunderstanding, Em. Emily, I would never cheat or do anything to ruin our marriage. Don't you know me by now? She was so emotional and forceful in her denial that for a moment I doubted my suspicions. Could I have overreacted to a toddler's imagination? Maybe so. Emily ended the argument by storming out of the living room, calling me paranoid. No actual proof had been uncovered, and the camera fiasco was enough to sour the atmosphere in our home. In the days following that confrontation, Emily grew colder. She'd still do normal tasks, make dinner, handle chores, care for Ava, but there was a permanent tension. She'd make snarky remarks about me, playing detective. I tried to apologize for planting the camera, but she brushed me off, her eyes full of hurt or resentment. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a swirl of doubts. Could my daughter have invented everything? Possibly, but kids often speak literal truths in naive ways. I tried discreetly asking Ava again, "Sweetheart, who was that person who brought you candy?" She only said, "He's nice," then changed the subject to her toys. My wife never left them alone to chat again. She'd intercept or distract Ava. If I pressed, Emily would glare and say, "Don't confuse her more." Once or twice, I came home earlier than usual, hoping to catch a glimpse of anything suspicious. Each time, the house was quiet. The door was locked, the blinds partially drawn. Emily gave me an odd look, as if she suspected my motives. We rarely had any intimacy after that. She either said she was tired or not feeling well. At times, she'd stay up late on her phone, texting. If I casually asked who she was talking to, she'd snap, "None of your business." Tension aside, we mostly kept a facade of normalcy around Ava. We still read bedtime stories to her. We still had breakfast together on weekends. But underlying it all was this sense that something had changed irreparably. Revelations from the past, out of curiosity. I tried to see if my old friends who'd known Emily in college had any clues. I heard rumors that she reconnected with an ex from her dorm days, Brian Carter, a name I faintly recalled. Some friend of a friend said he'd heard Emily was messaging Brian on social media, but that was third-hand information. I couldn't confirm it. I had no direct evidence, no screenshots. Nevertheless, the rumor matched the story about Emily having had multiple boyfriends back then, possibly including Brian. Could she have reignited an old flame? The thought gnawed at me. The nights I confronted her about Brian, she always sneered as if I was paranoid, and she never confessed to any contact with him. A couple of weeks passed. By this point, our marriage was on shaky ground. We argued frequently. Every discussion about errands or money erupted into jabs about trust. Then came the day that shattered my illusions. I arrived home at 6 p.m. to find Ava with Emily in the living room. Emily was sitting on the floor, arms folded, looking resolute. A half-packed suitcase stood next to the couch. My pulse quickened. Me, heart pounding. "Emily, what's going on? Why is there a suitcase out?" Emily, quietly, "We're leaking. Michael, I can't live like this. Under your suspicion. I've had enough." Me, "Wait, hold on. You're taking Ava. Where are you going?" She looked at me with pained eyes, then turned away. "Emily, I'm going to my mom's place for a while. Maybe longer. Brian is," she paused, as if deciding whether to reveal the truth. "Well, it doesn't matter. I've realized I can't fix what's broken here." Hearing the name Brian spoken out loud nearly made my ears ring, so it was him. All my doubts, all my nightmares suddenly felt validated and at the same time devastating. Me, voice trembling. So, you are leaving me. For him. That's it. Emily, tearing up. I don't want to do it this way, or we can't keep fighting. This environment is bad for Ava. You spy on me, you don't trust me. I'm done. Me, don't blame me for not trusting you when you've apparently been lying. Our daughter basically told me there was another father figure coming around. I, I can't believe you. Emily, how could you? Emily, I don't owe you an explanation. I'm just done. I love Ava, and I'm taking her with me. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, to beg, to do something. When I was paralyzed, she was effectively confirming the existence of this Brian. At least that's what I interpreted from her words. Possibly she was heading to her mother's place, but with an eye toward living eventually with him. My mind spiraled with fear that she'd vanished, preventing me from seeing my daughter. Meet softly. You can't just run off with Ava. She's my daughter too. Emily, wincing, I'm not cutting you out of her life, but I can't stay here. This marriage is suffocating. If you want to set up visitation or something, we can talk. But right now, I'm leaving. I knelt by Ava, who was hugging a teddy bear. She blinked at me, half confused. I murmured reassurance that I loved her. Emily ushered her away, collecting some children's clothes, a few stuffed animals, all while ignoring my pleas to wait to talk this through. Finally, she walked out, suitcase rolling behind her, Ava's small hand in hers, the front door closing with a decisive thud. A home left in silence. After that day, the house felt eerily vacant. No more cartoons playing in the background. No more Emily humming while she cooked. No toddler giggles, just me, the quiet walls, and a swirling sense of betrayal. I tried calling Emily's phone. She never answered. Then I tried her mother, who basically told me Emily needed space. She said something cryptic about how Brian was an old friend. I demanded to see Ava. She offered to let me come by on weekends under her supervision. It felt humiliating, but at least it was a chance to see my daughter. Meanwhile, I discovered some of my wife's personal items missing from the bedroom, personal documents, her treasured photo album from college. I realized she might be gone for good. My anger warred with heartbreak, a constant ache in my chest. I combed through any financial statements for signs of something suspicious. Nothing major surfaced, except a few restaurant charges I didn't recognize. Possibly they were her lunches with him. It was painful to dwell on. A wave of memory hit me about that first conversation with Ava when she said, "We have two gaddies." That was the moment I should have confronted Emily more directly or done something more decisive. But hindsight is always cruel. Weeks of uncertainty. In the following weeks, Emily texted me sporadically, only regarding Ava's well-being. She set a time for me to drive to her mother's house and spend 2 hours with our daughter on Saturdays. She never returned to the old house, no mention of reconciliation. She didn't explicitly say she was with Brian, but through the grapevine, I heard they'd been spotted around town together. Rumor had it that Brian was renting a small condo near the city center and that Emily spent nights there sometimes. My old resentments flared, but I had no direct confrontation with her. One day, I quietly asked Ava if she liked staying with Mommy's friend Brian. Ava shrugged and said, "He's nice. He brings candy." My heart clenched, but I forced a smile for her sake. She was an innocent child caught in the crossfire. Now, it's been nearly half a year since Emily left. We're in the midst of discussing a formal separation agreement. I remain in the old house, although every corner reminds me of her. My legal counsel says we can pursue joint custody or shared parenting. Emily's proposed that Ava live primarily with her, with me having weekends or certain days. The arrangement is up in the air. My daughter is the only bright spot in the gloom, though each time I see her, I sense her confusion about why Mommy and Daddy aren't together. The biggest unanswered question for me is how it all started. Did Emily truly rekindle a college romance behind my back for months? Was it sudden? Did she simply get bored with a stable life while I worked too many hours? I blame myself, in part, for not being around more, for not realizing she craved something I wasn't giving. I find it ironic. People warned me about her college days, but I brushed them off, thinking she'd outgrown that. Perhaps old habits die hard. Maybe she was never fully satisfied with the quiet, good life I offered. Or maybe I was never as present as she needed me to be. Conclusion: a painful new normal. As of today, Emily remains gone. I'm left piecing together the fragments of my life. Our once peaceful home is silent. The presence of Hapa number two in my daughter's life is a harsh reality. That tiny camera fiasco, which I thought might confirm or dispel my suspicions, ended up fracturing what was left of our trust. Some might say Emily had already made her decision. The camera incident merely forced the confrontation earlier. I reflect on how I used to come home, greet my wife with a kiss, laugh with Ava, and think all was well. Now, every memory is tinged with the knowledge that Emily was drifting away. People ask me, "Are you sure you want a divorce? Could counseling have helped?" I don't know. Maybe if we'd seen a counselor earlier, we could have uncovered her dissatisfaction, or I could have realized how absent I was emotionally, or maybe not. Once trust is shattered, picking up the pieces is daunting. My focus is on being the best father I can for Ava. I'm learning to navigate a new schedule, 2 or 3 days a week with her. She's young enough that maybe she won't carry strong memories of this ordeal. That's my hope anyway. Meanwhile, I push forward, uncertain if the best approach it is to let go of my anger or keep it alive to distance myself from Emily. I never found proof on tape. I never saw explicit evidence, just rumors and glimpses from a naive child's mouth. But the outcome was the same. Emily leaving, presumably with the man from her past, showing me that the quiet, good life was never enough for her. Now I face the aftermath, forging a new path alone. Some nights, I replay that moment Ava said, "We have two papas." I wonder if things might have been different if she'd never uttered that phrase. Would Emily have stayed continuing the facade, or was she bound to leave eventually for a more exciting romance? Those questions swirl in my mind with no satisfying answers. But the truth is, she left me for another man. The details ultimately are overshadowed by that simple, painful fact. All I can do now is adapt. Eva is three, bright-eyed, and deserves every happiness. I intend to remain a constant presence in her life, no matter how complicated or painful, because in the end, she's my daughter, my anchor in this storm, and she needs me as much as I need her. That is my story, a marriage of 6 years seemingly tranquil, undone by old habits and betrayal. A father who wanted only to provide, blindsided by hints from his own child. A hidden camera that never fulfilled its purpose but triggered a confrontation that changed everything. A wife who, after protests and denial, simply packed up and left, taking my little girl into a new world where I'm just the father on the sidelines. Now I stand on the edge of this chapter, uncertain but determined to keep going, because life doesn't stop for heartbreak. It pushes you onward, forcing you to find strength you never knew you had. Thanks for watching my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe.